So let us go to a component folder and create one file and call it fragment.js. Inside it, we are going to use the snippet rfce to create functional component. In our return statement, we are going to write this is a fragment lesson. You can write anything you wish. So let us include this component into app component. So here I'll write fragment. It has been imported here inside of React, but we need to take it off from here. The reason is it will not render because it will find this fragment inside the React where it's a wrong directory. So I'll say here import. Then what we import a fragment. Then from it is in a component folder. Okay, so let's go to our browser and see. Great, so it's working. Now let's go back to our VS Code and change this div to h1 tag. So we go to this component, to this div tag here, and change it to h1. Okay, we need it to change it to h1. So h1. Okay, let me take this way off. Let's say here h1, and this one here I have to cause it h1. Okay, now I'm going to add one paragraph here to the p tag, and I'll say this is fragment paragraph. Okay, now we see here there's an error. When we touch it, it's claiming that JSX expression must have one parent element. And when we go to a browser, so it is getting us with the same error. Now we need to wrap the whole element within one div tag. Let's get back to VS Code. You have a multiple elements to be returned. You need to have a one closing div tag. So we are going to write here div. Then I'll take the closing tag here and put it down here. Okay, now the error has gone. So let's go back to our browser. Bam, we see. Now let us inspect the element from here. Okay, so inspect it. Okay, now when we go here to our app component and click here, when we open, okay, now here you see we have an additional div inside of our DOM root. Okay, now this is where fragment come into the concept. Okay, we don't need this additional div here, and the only way of removing this one here is to introduce the fragment. So here, instead of writing this div, I'll take it off and I will replace it with react.fragment. Fragment. Let's get back to browser, and if we check again here, we refresh and check the element again here, the body. Okay, now we see we don't have anymore that additional div tag. It has been gone. So that's the first way that the fragment can be used. Now let's see the second way of which you can use the fragment. we are going to create in two component here. The first one, we are going to say it's a table.js, and the second one will be called column. Okay, to be called column.js. We are going to use again a snippet RFCE to create functional component. Now here we are going to take off this div and we are going to introduce a table tag here. It will have a table body and it will have a table row. Now inside of our row it's where we need to have our table data. Now for the columns. So these columns we are going to write them inside here. So again here we will use a snippet RFCE, and here we are going to have td1, this one I'll write here, channel, and the second td I'll write code x 2020. Okay, now we are going to include this column component inside of our table. So we write here column, make sure it has been imported on top, and then we are going to include it inside of our app.js. So at the moment I'll take this one off and I will comment also it from here, and then I'll have to include here a table. Make sure it has been imported on top. Now let's get back to our browser and see what has happened. Here we have two column, okay, channel and codex. Now let me inspect this element. When we check it here, again we have additional div tag here. Okay, and when we check to a console, we get an error message saying that warning, validating DOM nesting tag td cannot appear as a child of a div. Okay, so this problem can be solved again by using a fragment. How do we solve? Let's get back to VS Code and to our table. From here we'll take this div off. Okay, and instead of having this div, we are going to have react.fragment. Okay, we have some slight mistake here, we have to correct it. Okay, so we take this. Okay, let's undo. Sorry, so we have a slight fragment, a slight mistake, need to correct it. Great, and great, we see now we don't have any error anymore. Now let us assume we have an array of item in a variable called item. Okay, and here we have a const item. This is an empty array. Okay, then we called have item.map. Okay, so what we do here, inside of our return statement here, we can have items, which is this item here, dot map, and in we are going to have item. It will have this R function. Then it is going to return the fragment. So here it will return react dot fragment. This is, for example, we need to return the list of items here. Okay, so this is where we are going to use the key attribute inside of the fragment. So another use of the fragment, we can use the key attribute to return a list of items. So here I will have a h1 tag, and this I may write in title, and here I will display the paragraph, can be paragraph. Okay, paragraph here, and here it will display the item dot title. So inside of our fragment here, we are going to have key, which will have item dot id. Okay, so this one can be done within a fragment. Now we have a shorthand that we can use it in a fragment. Let us take all of this here and clean it. Okay, so we are going to delete the fragment here and leave these shorthands. Okay, so when you get back to our browser, nothing has been changed. Okay, so the shorthand has been tweaked, but it has its limitations. If you use shorthand, you can't pass the key attribute. As the previous concept, we learn how we can display a list of items using a key attribute inside of a fragment. Then if you use shorthand, meaning that you cannot use the key attribute. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and welcome to the next videos.